If you are not a fan of Marvel comic books, then you might have been wondering what on earth Hawkeye was doing with a sword during the first Endgame trailer. No, it's probably not that he misplaced his bow and arrow. There's actually a comic book precedent for his appearance that many fans have been eagerly awaiting. We'll introduce you to the character named Ronin and explain what could have convinced Clint Barton it was time to rebrand. Let's start out by answering a question that you're probably asking yourself right now, which is, who the heck is Ronin? If you stick to the movies, that's a fair question, since Ronin hasn't yet made an appearance in the MCU, but in the comic books, there have been many heroes who have gone by the name of Ronin over the years. These include Maya Lopez, Eric Brooks, Alexei Shostakov, and of course, our very own Clint Barton. Now let's talk about how Clint ended up ditching the name Hawkeye in favor of Ronin, since it may contain some clues for what's going on right now in the MCU. Everyone knows that Wanda Maximoff has her own set of emotional challenges to deal with, and these, coupled with her incredible powers, can often cause trouble. At one point in the comics, her powers drive her insane, and she brings a Kree warship down over New York City. In the ensuing battle, Hawkeye ends up being blown to bits in an attempt to save his teammates, but don't pile the hate on Scarlet Witch just yet, because even though Clint's dead, he gets better with her help. All it takes is a little bit of moving reality around to set things right, and all of a sudden, Clint's back with no memory of what happened, but when he does remember, he's not too tickled about it and pays Scarlet Witch back by shooting her with an arrow. Yeah, as you've probably guessed, messing with Scarlet Witch is generally a bad idea, even if she kind of deserved it. Clint ends up being wiped from existence, and understandably, everyone thinks he's gone for good, and that's a fair assumption, but it turns out to be a bunch of baloney because Hawkeye gets resurrected. He hangs out with Doctor Strange and then ends up hooking up with Scarlet Witch, who at this point has no memory of her past. You gotta love those awkward comic book romances. Anyway, he finds out that while he was away, Kate Bishop has been going by the name Hawkeye, and he's surprisingly cool with it. Echo, the original Ronin, gives Clint permission to use her secret identity, and all is well with the world. Well, sort of. Those are the facts about what happened to Clint and how he ended up as Ronin, but it's hard to describe his mental state throughout this whole thing. We've seen Clint be a generally affable guy, but his days as Ronin were marked by a much darker and grittier version of the character than we're used to seeing in the MCU. If Clint has made the transition from Hawkeye to Ronin, we're guessing it's not because anything good has happened to him, and we're not just talking about the finger snap of doom, which was almost inconceivably catastrophic. It was so bad, even Captain America looks like he's in therapy because of it, based on the Super Bowl Endgame trailer. It's been made clear that the MCU version of Clint is a family man. I mean, listen, this guy gave up being a superhero in order to spend more time with them. Of course, the second things got interesting, he was quick to pick up his bow and arrow and get back to business, but come on, who doesn't want to be a superhero? Hi, childhood dream, right here. During Captain America Civil War, Hawkeye's back in action before promptly being taken out of action and placed under house arrest. Womp womp. Hey, listen, nobody said being a superhero is easy, just that it's cool. As we all know, the Sokovia Accords means it's a bad time to be a superhero, and even after his first slap on the wrist, we doubt Clint was eager to get back out there. In fact, many fans believe this was why Clint was conspicuously absent from Avengers Infinity War. Maybe he decided to stay home with his family instead of risking getting in trouble, but does that really sound like Clint? Or really anyone with any common sense? Thanos isn't just some random evildoer trying to rob a bank or even level a city. He was trying to destroy half of all life in the universe, so we can't exactly picture Clint simply deciding not to suit up because he doesn't want to get in trouble, either with the government or with his wife. Would he really have let his anger at Tony Stark or the possible legal or family consequences stop him from suiting up to save the world? We just don't think so. And we think there's more to him becoming Ronin than just dealing with what comes after the decimation. Remember where Clint was when we saw him in the trailer for Avengers Endgame? He looked to be in Japan, standing over the bodies of slain members of the Yakuza. If everything was going great in Clint's life prior to the decimation, how did he end up in Japan, taking down members of an organized crime syndicate? Even if his entire family was lost in the decimation, it would seem like a very strange and unexpected time to cross the world and restart being a costume crime fighter, let alone with a different identity. During the second Endgame trailer, we saw Captain America seemingly taking part in a support group for those who lost loved ones in the decimation. He's not in disguise, and his very handsome and recognizable face is on full display. Like Clint, Steve Rogers was also considered a criminal following the events of Civil War. We know he went undercover forever for a while, but in the aftermath of Infinity War, it seems like the time for that has passed. If the decimation caused Steve Rogers to show his face to the world once more, why did it cause Clint to hide it more than ever? The simple answer is that it wouldn't. Whatever happened to Clint could have happened before the snap. This could also explain why we didn't see anyone communicating with Clint in any capacity during Infinity War. Perhaps they simply couldn't find him because he had already become Ronin. One of the many awesome things about the MCU is that we get to see how something that occurs in one movie has a ripple effect through the whole timeline. The Battle of New York was an epic moment during the Avengers, but in Spider-Man Homecoming, we saw Adrian Toomes struggling to take care of the aftermath. If it wasn't for Thanos giving the Tesseract to Loki, maybe he would have never become the Vulture. Since the Battle of New York, there's been no shortage of crime and scary situations occurring here on Earth. Heck, the Sokovia Accords, which were the main focus of Civil War, happened because civilians lost their lives during a battle involving superheroes. This is just our way of saying Clint could have lost his beloved family in a number of terrible ways even before the decimation happened. In the comics, he becomes Ronin following the events of Civil War, which seems to coincide nicely with this timeline. That being said, we doubt his transformation has anything to do with Scarlet Witch, otherwise this would have probably been mentioned, and if you remember, Scarlet Witch was one of the unlucky people who perished at the end of Infinity War. If you thought Clint's absence during Infinity War was going to be glossed over, yeah, think again. Patience is a virtue, according to Joe Russo when asked about Hawkeye not appearing in the movie. He assured fans he hasn't forgotten about Clint Barton and that his story is no less important than that of any other member of the Avengers. Russo stated, "We cooked up a story for him that is a little bit of a long play, not a short play. It seems like whatever Clint was doing during Infinity War was indeed significant and will play into his actions following the decimation." Co-writer Stephen McFeely confirmed some characters who weren't as prominent during the previous film will get their time to shine during Endgame. Although there are a ton of characters involved here, the expansive nature of the MCU means that there's time for everyone to shine, and this includes Clint. Even Marvel Studios head Kevin Feige admits to being a huge Hawkeye fan, making us think there's a lot more in store for his character. Feige has confirmed as much and adds that he believes Hawkeye's just as awesome as any other Marvel character. Although he knows some people joke about Hawkeye being the weakest Avenger, he can't help but notice that the second he doesn't show up, everyone wants to know where he is. It's possible Clint lost his family, took on the darker and grittier Ronin persona in order to work more covertly and started fighting crime again. This certainly seems like a reasonable explanation, and there aren't many things more dangerous than someone with nothing to lose. Thor even points this out during Infinity War when he's working on creating Stormbreaker. If this is true, it could present a potential difficulty during Endgame. We've seen what happens when people let their emotions control them and then don't stick to the plan. Star-Lord completely blew it by lashing out at Thanos. And if Thor had just aimed for the head, things would have ended very differently. Ronin is more than simply a different look for Clint. It symbolizes that he's going through a very dark and challenging time in his life. But let's not forget that we now have things like time travel and multiple timelines in the MCU. Yeah, you can thank Doctor Strange for making things more complicated there. Some people think Hawkeye is a useless superhero, and on the surface, we can see why. After all, he's a human dude who doesn't even have a super suit. And when you stack him up against someone like Thor, well, it's not all that impressive, but it's been demonstrated over and over again that Hawkeye's a skilled tactician and is able to read and interpret scenarios much better than his peers. Also, because he's an average-looking human, it's easy for him to go undercover and help out in some of the many situations which require subtlety. Thor may be good at fighting, but discreet isn't really in his vocabulary. So when it comes time to potentially travel through time in order to gather Infinity Stones and take down Thanos, there's no doubt Clint would be extremely useful. We could imagine someone like Natasha going to great lengths in order to help him out. What if the Ronin we saw in the first trailer isn't the one we're used to seeing in the MCU? Is it possible the Clint we know perished in the decimation like so many others, causing Natasha to visit another timeline in order to recruit him? He could be from one of the many other timelines where Thanos triumphs. And if he's Ronin, that means he likely has no ties left with his current timeline. Why not hop over to another where it seems as though there might be at least a slim chance of defeating the Mad Titan, right? Different universes and timelines timelines are commonly used in the comic books, but we're just starting to see them utilized in the MCU. This could really help take the concepts to the next level by bringing Clint from another universe over to the MCU timeline. Now, let's talk about the Endgame trailer which premiered during the Super Bowl. Although it was short and we only saw Clint for a moment, it looked as though he had on his trademark bow and arrow instead of a sword. Could this be another example of time being played with? That red glow on his face looks awfully familiar. It looks almost like the reddish glow of the Reality Stone, and takes us back to when Jane Foster came upon it during Thor: The Dark World. Is it possible Clint was Ronin while he was going rogue as a superhero, but becomes Hawkeye when his friends need him again? A popular Endgame theory is that our heroes will end up going back in time in order to claim the Infinity Stones from various places in the timeline. If Clint's on board with the plan, it's possible Hope has broken through his Ronin persona, and now Hawkeye is going to help out his friends. Of course, it's a bit hard to deduce from this extremely short snippet, but it could mean something truly significant. We've been excited about the prospect of seeing Ronin show up in the MCU, but could it be possible that we see Clint as both Ronin and Hawkeye? When you consider that Endgame likely involves no small amount of time travel, it suddenly doesn't quite sound so crazy. Taking on the mantle of Hawkeye again could symbolize that he is wholly committed to the Avengers and fighting back against the Mad Titan. We know the Russo brothers want us to have patience, but we can't help thinking about what comes next for our heroes as we head into the Endgame.
The excitement for Avengers Endgame is out of this world, with everyone talking about how the dusted heroes might come back to life, or how Thanos will be defeated, or who we'll say goodbye to. Despite all of this, you might have forgotten about the threat of the Infinity Stones themselves, and the Mind Stone might not only prove to be the most dangerous one of them all, it might turn our favorite Mad Titan into a demented, grieving psycho. But before we get started, we have a brand new channel for you called Behind the Screen. Head over there for more movie content. The Infinity Stones. There are 6 of them. They're colorful and they're like Pokemon. You gotta collect them all. The 6 gems were part of the MCU ever since the first Thor movie, and they were the main focus of so many Marvel movies. There are millions of questions on our minds as we wait for Avengers Endgame, including how will Tony Stark return to Earth, and what happened to Captain America's magnificent beard. So many questions, so many possible answers, but it's a safe bet that the Infinity Stones will be the answer for at least some of these questions. For a while, everyone was wondering about the Soul Stone. They were asking where it's hidden and who has it, but it seems like we've all forgotten about the one stone that might have been manipulating Thanos for years, and it might have been the cause for the Mad Titan's crusade to restore balance to the universe. We were first introduced to the elusive Mind Stone all the way back in the first Avengers film. The movie starts with Loki getting the Mind Stone from Thanos. No one really paid too much attention to it at the time, since the stone was hidden inside the scepter, and we had to wait years before it was finally revealed that the Mind Stone was hidden inside the scepter all along. Plot twist! The Mind Stone's clearly bigger than the other stones, and it has its own special place on the Infinity Gauntlet. It was suggested that the Infinity Stones are sentient, and they make their own choices, including accepting or rejecting who gets to use them. For example, let's look at the Space Stone in Captain America: The First Avenger. Red Skull tried to hold it, but the Space Stone was like, no, ugly Hydra man, don't touch me, away with you! And it kicked him all the way to Vormir, where he apparently became a Sith Lord or something. We didn't see the Space Stone doing that since then, but it's possible that it accepted other users, while it rejected Red Skull, and can we really blame it for that? Red Skull's an evil Hydra creep. No one wants to be touched by someone like that. Speaking of Red Skull and Vormir, when Thanos came to visit, he found out that the Soul Stone is somewhat of a diva, and a big fan of the Bible story where Abraham is asked by God to sacrifice his son Isaac. Of course, in that story, God wanted to test old Abe, but Thanos probably isn't a big fan of the Bible. Anyway, to get the Soul Stone, Thanos had to sacrifice his favorite daughter, Gamora. Pretty dark stuff, but it's another example of a stone being all sentient and stuff. But the Mind Stone was far more impressive when it comes to that. We saw Loki using the stone to mind control others in the first Avengers film, but in a recent retcon by Marvel, it was revealed that Loki was actually being manipulated by the stone himself. The Mind Stone pretty much brought the worst out in Loki, making him do far more villainous deeds than usual. Let's also not forget that the Mind Stone was the reason why Ultron went nuts on the Avengers in Age of Ultron. If the Mind Stone was able to manipulate both Loki and Ultron, who both had it in their hands for barely a week, who knows what effects the stone had on Thanos. Now, the interesting thing is that while the stone brought out the worst of Loki and it turned Ultron into Skynet, the stone wasn't able to corrupt Vision. The witch-loving android had the Mind Stone in his pink forehead for a while, but at no point did he decide to go all 80s Arnold Schwarzenegger on the Avengers. It's possible that this means that the Mind Stone itself isn't evil. While it's sentient, it's not a person. For the stone, it's not about right and wrong, it's about the person who is using it. The stone might just be simply reacting to the nature of whoever holds it. Unlike Vision, Loki's the god of mischief, and he's no Boy Scout. But while he did some nasty things in his time, he wasn't pure evil. With that being said, Loki did have some inner darkness, rage, and jealousy, and the Mind Stone simply acted on these dark feelings. On the other hand, Vision's a pure being, and there's no evil inside him to manipulate. Heck, even Thor's hammer accepted his pureness, so the Mind Stone reacted to Vision in a positive way. The idea that the Mind Stone could bring out the worst of people is a pretty scary one. Even Tony Stark couldn't resist its influence when he held it in Age of Ultron, and that's not to mention the fact that the stone gave both Wanda and Pietro Maximoff powers and influenced their own inner darkness. But unlike the others, Thanos isn't a very nice guy, and if the Mind Stone reacts to what's in a person's heart, it's safe to say its reaction to Thanos would be very dark and extreme. Unlike the other stones, the Mind Stone was already in Thanos' possession when we first saw it. We never found out how the Mad Titan got his hands on it or where the stone was hidden beforehand, but if the Mind Stone did influence the minds of everyone who came into contact with it, it's possible that the stone has been playing with Thanos' brain for a long time, potentially being the cause for his mad crusade to restore balance to the universe. Think about it. This could explain Thanos' narrow view when it comes to the use of the stones in Infinity War. Thanos' worry about the fate of the universe could have been easily solved with the power of the stones. He could have altered reality to make sure the universe will have infinite resources and make everything awesome for everyone. But instead, the Mad Titan decided it'd be for the best to simply wipe out 50% of all life. Great plan there, champ. It's possible that, following Thanos losing everyone he knew on Titan, he west a teeny-weeny rampage, and once he found the Mind Stone, it reacted to that madness in the worst way possible, driving Thanos to be unable to see any reason, giving him tunnel vision that prevented him from seeing any other alternative but the decimation. It's very possible that, since Thanos spent so much time with the Mind Stone before giving it to Loki, its effects on him were irreversible. After Loki was parted from the scepter, his actions in the following films were more reasonable. In fact, he started acting more like an anti-hero and less like a full-blown villain. When Hawkeye was under the influence of the stone, all it took was a good knock on the head to free him from Loki's mind control. But Loki didn't have the Mind Stone in his hands for long, unlike Thanos, who might have been exposed to it for years. So even after he gave the scepter to Loki, the effects of the Mind Stone didn't just fade away, and Thanos was still obsessed about balancing the universe. Of course, our tears every night are an indication that Thanos was eventually successful with his mission to balance the universe, but it did take him some time until he actually tried to really achieve his goals. Seriously, it's been so long since that first time we saw Thanos. Why did it take him so long for him to do his thing? Well, we think it's probably because he was practicing his finger-snapping skills, and there's no shame in that. 1 and 2 and 3. Some people have a harder time to snap their fingers than others, and it's harder to do it with a golden magical metal gauntlet on your hand, that's for sure. We think Thanos spent all his time sitting on his floating throne, perfecting his snap, so when he finally gets all the Infinity Stones on his gauntlet, he won't end up embarrassing himself in front of everyone. See, kids? Practice makes perfect. Anyway, let's be serious here for a second. The fact that Thanos has all the stones now is a serious cause for concern. We're not sure how Thanos felt about his Black Order, but we do know how he felt about his favorite daughter, Gamora, who he sacrificed. That last act really did a number on Thanos, and what's worse than a Mad Titan? A grieving Mad Titan with 6 all-powerful rocks. Gamora's death might hurt Thanos in Endgame, as he did see her right after the snap, and it's possible that the guilt might eat him from the inside. With the Mind Stone right there on his hand to mess with his head, the Thanos that the Avengers might face in Endgame won't be a calculated Titan on a mission to balance the universe, but a demented, grieving psycho who doesn't care who lives and who dies. So yeah, we'll say the threat of the stones is graver now than it was before. Beyond that, even if the heroes are able to strip Thanos of the stones, they might still face the threat of the Mind Stone themselves. It's very possible that the Mind Stone will try to influence anyone else who comes into contact with it. Just imagine if, somehow, the Hulk gets his hands on the Mind Stone. That'll be pretty bad for everyone. Did someone just whisper World War Hulk? Huh? In that case, we'll need a bigger Hulkbuster, folks. Maybe Shuri can build one out of vibranium. That'll solve a few problems. It's unclear what the fate of the Infinity Stones will be after Endgame, but we think the Avengers will have a hard time just destroying them. Wanda Maximoff did destroy the Mind Stone, but it's possible that she was able to do it because her powers came from that stone. It's unclear if Wanda was able to do the same with the other stones. There might be no force in the universe that can destroy the 6 gems. Well, maybe Captain Marvel will just crush them with her bare hands. Hey, after all, she's advertised as the most powerful hero we've ever seen, so that could be a real badass moment. It's also possible that the resurrected Vision might be the key, since he did serve as a vessel for the Mind Stone for a few years, but who will protect the other stones? Beyond that, let's not forget that if the stones aren't destroyed, there's a chance they might fall into worse hands than Thanos, like Galactus, Annihilus, Dormammu, and many more. Just think about the terrifying effect the Mind Stone might have on those bad guys. All of this might lead to the formation of a new group in Endgame. In the comics, Adam Warlock forms a group known as the Infinity Watch, and its job is to protect each stone and keep them separated. We might get an MCU version of the team, but we don't think we'll see Adam Warlock and its leader since, so far, he was only teased in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, and we don't think he'll show up in Endgame. Since Doctor Strange knows his stuff about the Infinity Stones, it's possible that he'll take charge and form the new team. Strange did protect the Time Stone, and the only reason he gave it up was to achieve the so-called Endgame, so it'll make sense if the Time Stone stays under his protection. We assume that powerful characters like Thor and Captain Marvel are also obvious candidates for the Infinity Watch. At the same time, most people believe that we may say goodbye to many characters that were with us from Phase 1, and it's likely that the original Avengers will die, possibly as a sacrifice to bring back all the ones that were dusted in Infinity War. But what if something else happens to the original Avengers? Think about it. There are 6 stones and 6 OG Avengers, so it's hard not to do the math. What if the MCU's Infinity Watch will consist of the original 6 Avengers? By the end of the movie, the Avengers will go their separate ways, each vowing to protect the stones. It'll be a fitting end for the first 3 phases, with the heroes that were the main focus of these phases being the ones that keep the Infinity Stones safe moving forward. We're calling it. But before you go, we have just one more question for you. Do you love seeing behind-the-scenes footage of your favorite movies? If so, check out our brand new channel, Behind the Screen, for more awesome videos like this one.
Up until now, most of us have been assuming our heroes are going to undo the decimation at some point during Avengers Endgame. And you know what happens when you assume? People leave angry comments about it on your YouTube video. Well, today we're gonna explore what might happen if our heroes are unable or even unwilling to undo the decimation, and what it could mean for the future of the MCU. Here at CBR, we love to talk about all the wild, exciting, and crazy things that might happen in the MCU. Sure, the Captain America without a beard and the Captain America with a beard are probably not two different people, but it can be fun to explore different options. During Avengers Infinity War, Thanos committed a true crime against humanity by killing off half of the lucrative Marvel Studios / Disney franchises. We mean he killed off half of all life in the MCU, which is of course much, much worse. But Redditor Enervada has a theory which states the decimation may not ever be undone. We've seen many characters in the history of the MCU die and then come back to life. Even Thor is pretty tired of that same old trope since his brother usually does it at least once per movie. So there's a strong precedent for bringing characters back from the dead, or having them secretly not have been dead this entire time. Kind of a reverse The Sixth Sense thing. Yeah, we were sad at the end of Infinity War and might have cried harder than Steve Rogers, but we didn't think the decimation would be undone because of emotional reasons. Our reasons were, well, for one, have you seen the trailer for Spider-Man Far From Home? According to Marvel Studios head Kevin Feige, the movie comes out moments after the conclusion of Endgame. And if the snap wasn't undone, Peter Parker would have bigger problems than remembering to pack his toothbrush. In addition, Marvel Studios has also confirmed sequels to both Black Panther and Doctor Strange, meaning these characters are going to have to find their way back to life at some point in Endgame. So how can we say there's a possibility the decimation might not be undone? It's a little bit complicated and a relatively new addition to the MCU, but it may have something to do with the multiverse. Comic book fans have long been familiar with the idea of there being more than one Marvel universe. The Ancient One explains this in Doctor Strange when she says this universe is only one of an infinite number. She adds that some universes are benevolent and life-giving, while others are filled with malice and hunger. But what she doesn't mention are the millions upon millions of universes that lay somewhere in the middle of those two extremes. It's probably because they don't sound too exciting, being too much like our boring old universe. Doctor Strange may have looked into over 14 million of these universes, but us moviegoers have seen a few of them ourselves. In Doctor Strange, we saw the Astral Realm, the Mirror Dimension, and the Dark Dimension, each one of them more unpleasant than the last. We also got a glimpse into a pocket dimension known as the Soul World at the end of Infinity War after taking a peek inside the Soul Soul Stone. It's one of these many parallel universes which might hold the key to how we can see some of our favorite heroes in the MCU without reversing the decimation. Doctor Strange giving Thanos the Time Stone is one of the most talked about moments of Infinity War, and for good reason. He flat out tells Tony that he'd happily let him and Peter Parker die if it meant protecting the stone, which is pretty harsh, but then after taking a look into a few million futures, he hands it right over to Thanos to save Tony. The thing is, what if he really didn't save him? What if by handing over the Time Stone, he knew Tony would ultimately not survive what would come next? It might have seemed like he saved Tony when the exact opposite was true. It's clear that, despite what movie audiences think, Thanos doesn't really see himself as a villain. As far as he's concerned, he's not the Mad Titan. He's the conscientious Titan. He gives this whole spiel about the importance of balance and how he's really doing everyone a favor by wiping out half of all life in the universe. We know he's just a great guy and a terrific father on top of it all. People who vanished during the decimation died. But what if they were simply transported to another universe? There could be a universe out there with all of the heroes who vanished during the decimation. It's possible those who were decimated only have vague memories of their old universe. If the decimation never happened at all, this could explain the events of the Spider-Man Far From Home trailer. It certainly doesn't seem to feature a world where half of everyone disappeared and then were brought right back. Things looked pretty grim in the Super Bowl Endgame trailer, and we just can't see things recovering that quickly. It would also explain why we don't see Tony Stark, but we do see Peter Parker. What if the universe our heroes are trying to save isn't their own, but whichever one their friends end up in? Maybe Doctor Strange was right and there's only one single universe where Thanos doesn't win, and it's not the one we're used to seeing in the MCU. Maybe the best our heroes can do is ensure their loved ones will be able to live on in their new universe. Yeah, we know that's pretty depressing, but after the ending of Infinity War, would it be that big of a surprise? Our heroes could both defeat Thanos and still be unable to undo the result of the decimation. Now, let's talk about this shiny new universe where the decimation never happened. Why would Marvel want to abandon their old universe and start over? If you think about it, Marvel could soon have an issue with overcrowding, and maybe getting rid of, let's say, half of its citizens might help. Okay, we realize we just compared Marvel Studios to Thanos, but just hear us out. We all know that with Disney acquiring Fox, there are a ton of other superheroes who can be incorporated into the MCU. Comic book fans have been waiting for a, well, Fantastic Four movie for as long as superhero movies have been a thing. And then we have the X-Men, who have an entire catalog of great movies already in existence. It's going to take a ton of careful planning in order to bring these characters successfully into the MCU, and in a world where Captain America does PSAs and Tony Stark announced he's Iron Man at a press conference, we'd need to know why these characters have been in hiding. Are we supposed to believe that nobody had any idea there's been a secret school for mutants going on for years in the MCU? It would be pretty complicated to explain away, but our heroes, or at least most of them, could end up in a universe where Xavier's School for Gifted Youngsters has always been a thing. And there would be some interesting character changes if everyone left behind no longer exists in the new universe. In the comic books, both Sam Wilson and Bucky Barnes have taken on the mantle of Captain America in the absence of Steve Rogers. Ever since they were kids, Steve and Bucky have been incredibly close, though not quite as close as some fans like to believe. Bucky had always been the stronger of the two until the whole super soldier serum thing, and then Steve ended up saving him on multiple occasions. Seeing him step into the role of Captain America after losing Steve would be interesting for sure. Whether it's Sam or Bucky who takes on the official role, we could definitely see these two working together and becoming a dynamic duo of their own. And let's talk about Nick Fury and Maria Hill, who we saw disappear during the post-credit scene of Infinity War. We saw Nick Fury in the trailer for Spider-Man Far From Home looking distinctly unvaporized. It's hard to say whether he counts his Avengers initiative as a win or a loss. On one hand, they've saved the world on multiple occasions. But then there's the whole Civil War business. Anyway, it seemed as though Fury had given up his hobby of collecting superheroes. But then we see him trying desperately to recruit Spider-Man. Why? If all of the Avengers were still around, it seems like Fury would have better options than a teenager. We're guessing Fury doesn't just want to know a good place to buy churros the next time he's in New York City. If the events of Civil War, Homecoming, and Infinity War happened in this universe, there's no doubt Fury would know that Spider-Man's being mentored by Tony Stark. If he wanted to set up a meeting with Peter Parker, couldn't he have talked it through with Tony instead of hunting down Peter himself on his class trip? Would Fury want to risk upsetting Tony by poaching Peter? Not only is Tony a superhero, but he's also excessively exceptionally wealthy, powerful, and rightfully protective of Peter Parker. If Tony was still around, we just don't think Fury would be talking to Peter the way we saw in the Far From Home trailer. But we do hear Iron Man and Thor referenced in the trailer, almost in passing. If the two characters had recently and terribly perished, we doubt they would have gotten name-dropped like that. But if half of the world had been wiped out and then restored, we also don't think anyone would be talking about the hero so casually. Could the Iron Man and Thor being mentioned be nothing more than echoes from a distant universe? The idea of the movie taking place in a different universe also gives a new meaning to the phrase far from home. We get that it refers to Peter Parker traveling to Europe, but it could also be a hint that the movie takes place in a different universe than Infinity War and Endgame. So what'll happen to all of the characters left behind during Endgame? We're guessing they're going to do something other than sit around and quietly accept their fate. Obviously, they're going to be doing their best to defeat Thanos and try to undo the decimation. But if it turns out that's just not possible, they may be able to save another universe. During Infinity War, one of the major themes was the idea of sacrifice. Vision sacrificed himself for the greater good before Thanos did the time warp yet again and rendered his sacrifice worthless. Groot sacrificed his arm to create Stormbreaker, and Doctor Strange handed over the Time Stone to save Tony. Being a superhero means making those kinds of tough decisions. It's not all shiny costumes and merchandising contracts. Of the heroes left on Earth, can you think of any who wouldn't be willing to sacrifice themselves to protect those who perished in the decimation? Would Okoye fail in her sworn duty to protect T'Challa? Would Tony and Rocket fail in their father figure duties to Peter Parker and Groot? We could go on, but we think you get the picture. It's possible the surviving heroes will continue to live on in the universe they're currently in, and it simply won't be featured in any more films. Or they could end up sacrificing themselves in order to defeat Thanos and ensure the safety of the prevailing universe. There's no doubt that the quantum realm and the multiverse are going to be major players in Endgame, and most people assume they're going to be utilized to undo the decimation. But if this theory is correct, we might see the MCU move forward in a whole new world. You know that exciting moment when a character says the name of the movie and the theater erupts into cheers? We're sorry to be the bearers of bad news, but if you were waiting for that moment in Captain Marvel, you'd still be waiting today. We learned that Captain Marvel is a woman of many names, but none of them is apparently Captain Marvel. We're assuming this is going to be addressed during Avengers Endgame, and might tie into important plot points involving Captain America. When we were first introduced to the protagonist of Captain Marvel, we were told her name was Veers, and that she was a member of the Kree race. However, later on we learned the name Veers came from a part of her dog tag, which was recovered after a plane crash. Her real human name was Carol Danvers. So how does Carol Danvers get the name Captain Marvel, and why wasn't it included in the movie? After all, what would the first MCU movie even be without the line, "I am Iron Man"? We doubt it's simply because Marvel Studios forgot to name their hero in the movie. Instead, we believe the name has too much significance to pack into Captain Marvel's origin story. We think Marvel Studios is biding their time until the big reveal during Avengers Endgame. Not only will this likely be a big moment for Carol Danvers, but possibly Steve Rogers as well. As you probably gathered from the movie, the Marvel part of Captain Marvel comes from Carol's mentor, Mar-Vell. Like Carol, Mar-Vell was a person of many names. She was a brilliant Kree scientist who lived and worked on Earth under the name Dr. Wendy Lawson. Mar-Vell worked for the United States Air Force, and they apparently didn't conduct a very thorough background check on her. Did they not notice her blue blood during her physical? Alright, we'll just chalk that up to some movie magic. While Carol's story in the comic books is different than that in the MCU, in both cases Mar-Vell is a mentor to her. Carol is in awe of Mar-Vell, and when they pass away, she takes on the name Marvel in their honor. In the comic books, she first calls herself Miss Marvel, which, although it doesn't sound as cool as Captain Marvel, was quite revolutionary at the time. Keep in mind that Carol Danvers made her comic book debut all the way back in 1968, and Miss Marvel finally got a self-titled series in 1977. At the time, female superheroes often struggled to be anything but one-dimensional, and many people worried about women being portrayed as more than wives and mothers. Although Carol has some amazing superpowers, she also has the super ability to doubt herself, which is something many of us can relate to. She resists taking on the mantle of Captain Marvel because she doesn't feel worthy of being considered a captain. Now, in her old life as a human being on Earth, it looks like she did indeed achieve the rank of captain based on the plane we saw bearing her name at the end of the movie. However, we also know Carol feels totally disconnected from her old life, and also feels full of regret for the things she's done while working with the Kree. We wouldn't be surprised if she struggles with the same issues she does in the comic books, where she doesn't feel worthy of being called captain. We all know there's another prolific captain in the MCU, and he and Carol Danvers have a lot of similarities. Both struggle to pass the physical requirements demanded of those who join the armed forces before getting help from an outside source. They both have strong senses of morality and justice and are willing to put themselves in danger to protect others. Steve Rogers has been the moral compass of the Avengers for quite some time, and many worry that he won't survive the events of Avengers Endgame. Not only are our heroes involved in their biggest battle yet, but there have been some hints indicating Steve might not survive. When he gazed wistfully at Peggy Carter's picture in the Endgame trailer, we couldn't help but think back to when he did the same thing just before plunging his plane into the ocean in an effort to save others. Sacrifice was a huge theme during Infinity War, and we wouldn't be surprised if he's called upon to make the final sacrifice during Endgame. Please note, we didn't say we wouldn't be sad if that happened. We plan on bringing plenty of tissues just in case. Many people have questioned who will replace Captain America, pointing to characters like Bucky Barnes or Sam Wilson, who also went by Captain America at various points in the comic books. But instead of replacing Steve Rogers directly, it's possible Marvel Studios will replace his role in the MCU with Carol Danvers' character. There's definitely only one Steve Rogers, but his strong sense of responsibility and justice is something the MCU needs, and it may fall on Carol Danvers to maintain it when he's gone. In the comic books, Carol Danvers eventually calls herself Captain Marvel in honor of the previous Captain Marvel, but it's Steve Rogers who encourages her to do so. She's reluctant to take on the name of someone she admired so much, but it's Steve who tells her Marvel would want her to have it. Before she takes on her most well-known title, she goes by other names, including Binary and Warbird. But it seems like in the MCU she's going to skip directly to Captain Marvel, possibly with the encouragement of Steve Rogers. After all, there's a scene near the end of Captain Marvel where Nick Fury talks about the name Marvel, and Carol Danvers corrects his pronunciation. This would have seemingly been the perfect time for Carol to take on the name. However, she distinctly chooses not to. We're guessing this means her name is going to have some added significance, which may become clear during Avengers Endgame. Scott Lang may be great at making us laugh and at close-up magic, but it's safe to say he isn't exactly the most brilliant mind in the MCU. That being said, just because he doesn't quite understand quantum technology doesn't mean he can't come through for our heroes in Avengers Endgame. With Hank Pym and his family gone, Ant-Man is the one with the most knowledge of and access to his technology, which could prove integral to defeating Thanos. For a convicted felon, Scott Lang is an incredibly likable guy. He's a doting dad with a great sense of humor. He's a superhero fanboy, at least where Captain America is concerned. There's no denying Scott has the skills and moral fortitude to be a hero, but more often than not, he doesn't act on his own accord. In both of his movies, he pretty much does everything he's ordered to do by Hank Pym and Janet Van Dyne. Even when we saw him in Captain America Civil War, he was just following the instructions of other more authoritative heroes. So it'll be interesting to see how he fares when he's on his own for a bit following the decimation. At the end of the mid-credit scene from Ant-Man and the Wasp, we thought Scott was hopelessly trapped inside the quantum realm, until he showed up perfectly fine in the trailer for Avengers Endgame. Now that's one magic trick that's actually impressive. But what happened to Scott Lang after he escaped the quantum realm, and before he got together with the rest of the surviving heroes? There have been many alleged spoilers and leaks floating around about Endgame, but one of them involving Scott Lang seems pretty plausible. A casting call went out looking for someone to play what sounds like an older version of Scott's daughter, Cassie Lang. In the Ant-Man movies, the part is played by Abby Ryder-Fortson, who has a few years to go before becoming a teenager, but there have been rumors that teenage actress Emma Thurman has been hired to portray an older Cassie Lang during Avengers Endgame. If an older Cassie Lang is going to make an appearance during Endgame, is it possible that Scott doesn't manage to exit the quantum realm with perfect timing? All things considered, it seems like it'd be pretty unlikely for him to get out at the right time, especially if his escape involves utilizing a time vortex. One theory is that at first, he overshoots and ends up a few years in the future. This could explain the older Cassie Lang as well as one of the scenes from the Endgame trailer. Scott ending up in the future and reuniting with Cassie would mean she survived the decimation, but Scott would still have plenty of motivation to put things right. At the very least, he'd want to save Hank, Hope, and Janet. And then there's Cassie's mother and stepfather whose whereabouts are unknown. It'd also be interesting to see how the world is faring years after the decimation, and might provide some valuable insight into how to stop Thanos. If you watch the trailer on YouTube, those few short minutes might have revealed a potentially interesting detail. During one scene, we saw Scott walking down the street in shock and awe. Behind him, we see a house which is way overgrown and looks to be in a state of disrepair, and those missing posters on the telephone pole in front of him look incredibly old, like they've been there quite some time. But what you might not have seen in the YouTube version was what Scott was clutching in one of his hands. It's easier to see on the Instagram version where the aspect ratio is slightly different, but it looks as though Scott is holding onto some kind of handle. In fact, it looks like the handle of one of those rolling suitcases, and somehow we don't think Scott has packed up his drum set to visit the Avengers. It seems more likely that he's holding onto the handle of Hank Pym's portable, shrinkable laboratory. We saw Hank's shrinkable lab in Ant-Man and the Wasp, and it makes sense that Scott would take it with him after escaping the quantum realm. After all, it's not like Hank's gonna be using it. Sorry, too soon. Not only is Scott likely bringing along Hank Pym's laboratory, but it looks like he's bringing the whole quantum realm along with him. Well, kind of. We saw him standing in front of his pal Luis's van when he pulled up to Avengers headquarters. Poor Luis. After his mother died, his father got deported, and his girl left him. That van was all he had. When it comes to resources, Scott is definitely not showing up to meet our other heroes empty-handed. And if Scott thinks seeing a telephone pole of missing posters is upsetting, just wait until he finds out he's missing too. He appeared among the victims of the decimation Bruce Banner was looking over during the very first Endgame trailer. Finding out you've been missing and presumed dead is some pretty heavy stuff, but thankfully, Scott's alive and well. Well, for now at least. One of the moments from the Endgame trailer we just can't stop thinking about is when we saw those snazzy new super suits our heroes were wearing as they purposely strode through the Avengers facility. At first glance, they bear a striking resemblance to Scott's Ant-Man suit, designed by Hank Pym and utilizing quantum technology. We're guessing Hank didn't leave a legion of other super suits in his lab, so it's likely someone else made these using his discoveries. And now that Tony Stark is finally helping out down on Earth instead of monologuing in space, there's a chance he helped create these suits along with Bruce Banner, and possibly even Shuri, if she survived the snap. Scott might not be able to understand any of Hank's work, but surely between Tony Stark and Bruce Banner, they could figure out some useful stuff. It's possible these suits combine the very best of Pym and Stark technology and are made for traversing the quantum realm. Why the quantum realm? Well, there are tons of possibilities. The quantum realm is home to some valuable resources, like quantum energy, and retrieving some of this was what Scott was doing in the first place when he got trapped there. Then there's the idea that the quantum realm is filled with time vortexes, which Janet Van Dyne warned Scott about at the end of Ant-Man and the Wasp. There's even hidden cities inside the quantum realm. If you missed that particular Easter egg, don't feel too bad. It was pretty hard to spot, but in a freeze-frame shot, you can clearly see a city exists within the quantum realm. We didn't have much of a chance to hear about the inside of the realm from Janet Van Dyne. Maybe in the excitement of being rescued, she forgot to tell everyone about the city hidden inside the quantum realm. Or maybe she filled everyone in at some point off screen. We know it's weird to admit, but Scott Lang might know something we don't if Janet did disclose more information about the quantum realm than what we were privy to. We might even get to see Scott make some of these discoveries for himself in Endgame. After all, if he can travel through time, how long he spends in the quantum realm is irrelevant up to a point. There's going to be a lot going on in Endgame, but it's possible that the quantum realm holds some secrets, which may come in handy when trying to take down the Mad Titan. And having Scott Lang be the one to introduce time travel as a real possibility is a particularly interesting one, as well as kind of a surprise. For a long time, we've been wondering how exactly Captain Marvel was going to factor into Avengers Endgame. We knew her standalone movie was going to take place in the 90s and that we haven't seen her around the MCU since then. Many fans wondered if she'd show up with a whole host of exciting new powers and knowledge of how to travel through time. There was even an interview with actor Samuel L. Jackson in which he stated Captain Marvel can travel through time. But in the movie, we didn't see any evidence of Carol Danvers being able to do that. Sure, she had access to advanced Kree technology, but we didn't see if any of this tech allowed her to travel through time at any point in the movie. If there's going to be any time traveling during Endgame, it looks like Ant-Man is going to be our best chance of this. Captain Marvel may have the strength to pose a serious threat to Thanos, but it looks like Scott is going to be the source of the knowledge needed to face him. In a way, this is kind of comforting to the many fans who feared Captain Marvel would swoop in to save the day at the expense of our well-known and much-loved heroes. Endgame is a precarious time to introduce a new character to the group, and many fans have worried about her being too overpowered. But if someone like Scott Lang is going to be bringing such useful information to the table, it looks as though Marvel is going to make sure everyone has their own important role to play. We're glad that Ant-Man isn't going to be pushed aside in favor of Captain Marvel, at least for now. Those new suits do look like they're meant to traverse the quantum realm, but they also have one interesting addition we didn't see in the trailers. A Funko Pop figurine of Tony Stark shows him wearing his new outfit with an interesting apparatus attached to his arm. It looks almost like a watch, and we're assuming it has a much more interesting function. We also spotted multiple cast members wearing these devices while filming Endgame and wearing their normal costumes. One popular theory about these devices is that they may have been created to hold an Infinity Stone. After all, if our heroes are going to recover the stones, they're going to need some way to transport them safely. In the set photos, it looks like our heroes have traveled back in time to the Battle of New York. If they're traveling back in time to collect the various Infinity Stones or somehow make copies of them, it makes sense that they'd need to have a way to get them back to the present day. But it's possible these devices are being worn by our heroes for a much more benign reason. After all, we've seen them on our heroes' wrists while they're wearing both the new suits and their regular costumes. It's possible these devices use quantum technology and simply allow the wearer to switch between their multiple outfits. We even saw Captain Marvel make various costume changes at the push of a button in her standalone movie, so it's possible that these devices cause the new suits to appear when the wearer needs to travel through the quantum realm, and then, when it's time to fight, they revert to their traditional costumes. We also think it's important to note that Scott Lang is wearing one of these new suits as well. It looks remarkably similar to his red one, but yet he still suits up with the rest of the team. This leads us to believe that these suits contain some kind of new feature, likely devised by Tony Stark, Bruce Banner, or both. Otherwise, Ant-Man would probably just wear the suit he's used to wearing. It's not like the group has ever worn matching suits before. They tend to all go their own ways style-wise. If our heroes are going to attempt to utilize the time vortexes inside the quantum realm, then it's possible that these suits are meant to withstand the challenges that come with that. We'd imagine going through a time vortex would put a certain amount of strain on a person, and perhaps these suits are meant to combat it. Scott's suit was designed for quick forays into the quantum realm, so it probably doesn't have all the bells and whistles of these new suits. Recently, actress Tessa Thompson has confirmed her character Valkyrie will be making a highly anticipated return in Avengers Endgame. The Russo brothers took great delight in dashing our hopes and dreams and destroying some of our favorite heroes during Infinity War. They even stated characters who weren't even in the movie, like Lady Sif and Betty Ross, were victims of the decimation. That's just cruel. But they were always clear Valkyrie is still alive, and we think there are big plans for her during Endgame. Thor Ragnarok was a great movie for many reasons, but it also introduced some truly memorable characters. We could go on and on all day about how director Taika Waititi's Korg stole the show, but today we're going to be talking about Valkyrie. For a character who showed up falling down drunk and sold our hero Thor into slavery, she sure did manage to win us over. Which is a testament to quality character building and storytelling, something which had been sorely lacking in the Thor movies up until this point. When we last saw Valkyrie in the MCU, it was the end of Ragnarok, when the Asgardians and their allies were escaping on a spaceship. After conducting a brief assessment of their former home and deciding it was irredeemably destroyed, the survivors set off looking for a place they could call home. The good news is that their search was short, but the bad news is that's because Thanos and the Black Order boarded their ship and started killing people. Since we didn't see Valkyrie at all during Avengers Infinity War, we couldn't help but wonder what happened to her. Could we have lost one of our favorite new characters already? But before you blame Thanos, the Russo brothers have confirmed Valkyrie is alive and well. Almost immediately following the decimation, they clarified that Valkyrie was one of the characters who survived, and said she managed to get off the ship in an escape pod during Thanos' attack. Considering that at this point the Russo brothers seem to delight in killing off characters we love, this seemed pertinent and seemed to strongly suggest we could see Valkyrie again during Avengers Endgame. And finally, at least one of our Endgame predictions came true because of new promo art for Endgame, which was recently released. Actress Tessa Thompson also confirmed we will be seeing Valkyrie again on the big screen this April. After the glow of vindication wore off, we were faced with a new question. What will Valkyrie's role be in the new movie? One seemingly obvious answer to this question would be the rescue of Tony Stark. We've seen him both seemingly adrift in space with no hope of rescue and safely back on Earth in the company of his fellow Avengers. Come on, Marvel trailers, make up your minds. Clearly, Stark manages to get back to Earth in one piece, and it may be Valkyrie who helps him get there. After all, we heard she was flying around in a spaceship. Tony is floating around in outer space. Come on, what more proof do you need? Plus, Valkyrie really has nowhere to go at the moment. Asgard is totally destroyed, and she didn't exactly leave Sakaar on the best of terms. There's also the idea that Valkyrie may team up with another fantastic female superhero, Captain Marvel. It turns out Tessa Thompson is a huge fan of Captain Marvel actress Brie Larson and has said she would love to work with her in the future. The two women have even shared some fan art of their respective Marvel characters, some of it suggesting the two may be more than just friends. Captain Marvel and Valkyrie have both lost their homes and their former teammates, and it seems like their characters would work well together on screen. Larson and Thompson have also gone through similar difficulties when it comes to being accepted into the MCU. Some fans were upset about the idea of the female superhero starring in a standalone movie and called for boycotts and protests of Captain Marvel. When Thompson took on the role of Valkyrie, her social media accounts were attacked by people making racist comments and saying she was totally wrong for the role. These two actresses haven't been shy about calling for more diversity in film and among film reviewers, and this has earned them enemies as well as fans. It would definitely be interesting to see their characters team up on screen just like Larson and Thompson work together behind the scenes. But just because Valkyrie befriends Captain Marvel doesn't mean she's replacing her blonde bestie entirely. It's clear Thor has a lot on his plate right now. He's the ruler of Asgard, a place which doesn't exist. He's gone through some tragic personal losses, and he was defeated in battle. While other heroes may have more Earth-based priorities, Thor has a lot more on his plate. Some fans theorize that we may get to see the Asgardian worlds of Hel and Valhalla at some point during Endgame. In Hel, we have Thor's sister Hela, who has managed to escape from there once, and it's possible she could again considering the recent cosmic chaos. Then there's Valhalla, which most likely contains Odin, Frigga, and the other Valkyries who were slain by Hela. Of course, we also think Loki being dead is going to come into play, although it's a crapshoot at this point which world he ended up in. But if Thor's going to venture into the realms of the departed, it makes sense Valkyrie would have a vested interest in accompanying him. Being able to see her fellow warriors again, even just briefly, could help provide Valkyrie with a sense of closure that would help her move on with her part in the MCU. What do you think about Valkyrie making an appearance in Avengers Endgame? Will she swoop in to save Tony and Nebula, or is there something even bigger in store for her? Let us know what you think is going to happen in the comments section below, and then click on that subscribe button for more videos from us here at CBR. We'll see you next time.
The ever-loving Hulk was the second character to get a solo movie in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and he very quickly became a fan favorite. Even Loki came around to the big green guy. But after that beatdown by Thanos in Endgame, the Hulk has been a no-show. Could it be possible that Banner won't wait for the Hulk's fickle mood and finally take the controls? Let's look at how that might happen. Since his first appearance in 1962 in the Incredible Hulk comic book, the Unstoppable Rage Machine has been a staple of Marvel Comics. On the page and on the screen, the Mean Green Wrecking Machine was a founding Avenger, as well as a key member of other teams, including the Defenders, and you think Jessica Jones had a hard time getting along with Danny Rand. But no matter whose jersey the Hulk wears, he's always played the dual role of secret weapon and liability. At his core, the Hulk really wants two things: to be left alone and to smash. For the most part, it has been the influence of his science half that has thrust the Hulk into the reluctant role of the hero. In fact, in the comic books, the Hulk sulks out of the Avengers almost as soon as they got upset over his inability to control his more destructive tendencies. It's always those who act the toughest that are the most sensitive, isn't it? That's been more or less true on the silver screen as well. When it comes time for Fury to pull the trigger on his Avengers initiative, they need the science side of the Brains and Brawn duo to track the missing Tesseract. That thing has caused so much trouble, but it turns out all this was a ruse by one god of mischief to get the Hulk to take out all of Earth's best defenders. How'd that work out for you, Loki? Good? No? Yeah. You'll get it right eventually, pal. Even in Age of Ultron, it just takes a whisper from the Scarlet Witch. Where did that power go, by the way? And the Hulk started taking out his rage on Johannesburg. The other Avengers have to come up with everything from talking of sunsets to a special suit of Iron Man armor to mitigate the risk of having the Hulk on your team. In Infinity War, the Hulk's unpredictability took on a whole new dimension. After getting an uncharacteristic beatdown at the hands of the Mad Titan himself, the Hulk remained a no-show during the rest of the movie, no matter how stressed out Banner got, only showing up enough to tell the good doctor, "No." This means that the Hulk wasn't available to save Stark, Strange, and Parker when the Black Order showed up to take the Time Stone, and the Hulk wasn't available to defend Wakanda from Thanos' army or even Thanos himself. That has to have a pretty demoralizing effect on Bruce Banner. When the world really needed his bigger, greener, angry half, he was nowhere to be found. While one might assume that the Hulk's pride was hurt, the Russo brothers had a different take, which they told Entertainment Weekly. A lot of people had interpreted that the Hulk was scared of Thanos. The Hulk has had his butt kicked before, so it wasn't like the minute he gets his butt kicked, he's gonna run and hide. It's really the notion that the Hulk and Banner have a very dysfunctional relationship, which was explored even further in Thor Ragnarok. And I think that relationship is starting to strain between the two of them, and the Hulk is not interested in playing the hero to Banner anymore. I don't know if the Hulk sees the value in the relationship. They both want to control Hulk's body. The Hulk brings fighting and strength to the table, and he's not quite sure what Banner is bringing just yet. So I think this is becoming a stubborn push and pull between two very disparate personalities stuck in one body. This has left Bruce Banner Hulkless, while he's watching his friends being taken off into space, and the remaining Avengers defeated by Thanos and his minions, resulting in half the population of the universe being turned to dust. That has to have an incredible toll on the more sensitive side of the science bros. With half of existence at stake, he might not be willing to wait for the Hulk to come around to the hero game and will take matters into his own hands. Early toy releases and promotional photos have hinted at the emergence of a version of the Hulk known as Professor Hulk. In order to understand what that means, let's look at the history of the variations of the Hulk in comics. The Hulk's iconic green skin, it turns out, was a matter of printing convenience. Stan Lee had wanted the Hulk to be gray, but the coloring turned out too difficult, and so the color was changed to green. This set the stage for the different kinds of Hulk personalities. By the Incredible Hulk number 302, flashbacks made canon the idea that the Hulk started gray and became green. Gray Hulk became, predictably enough, Gray Hulk, and the Green Hulk was referred to as Savage Hulk, the Hulk we know and love in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. The difference is that, while Gray Hulk is more morally ambiguous and disinterested in the puny lives around him, Savage Hulk is a raging destruction machine that you aim at things you want smashed. Gray Hulk could be more calculating, even adopting the persona of Joe Fixit, a Las Vegas security guard, when his spell prevented the Gray Hulk from changing back to Bruce Banner. Do not cheat at that casino. Security! What does that mean for the Hulk and Endgame? Throughout his time as host for the ever-loving Hulk, Bruce Banner has been struggling with a way to cope with the other guy. In his solo outing, he had worked with one Samuel Stearns, future Hulk foe the Leader, to rid himself of the Hulk altogether. When the Black Widow, Natasha Romanoff, came to recruit Banner, he even told her that he tried to just kill himself, but the Hulk spit the bullet back out. Bruce Banner in the comics has had a similar quest to manage living with a giant rage machine sharing space in his body, something that anyone who's had to deal with an angry Hulk has gotten behind. Which brings us back to Professor Hulk. In the Incredible Hulk number 377, Banner's buddy Doc Samson saw his pal struggling, as he and the two Hulks, the Gray and the Savage, squabbled over who got control, which meant that essentially everyone was losing. So Samson acted as a negotiator between the warring parts of Banner's brain and brought the three personalities together to form a merged Hulk known as the Professor. All of the rage powers of the Savage Hulk with the science bro powers of Banner and the cunning of the Gray Hulk. While this seemed like it was a Banner in control of the Hulk, it was all an illusion. It turned out to be a fourth incarnation, making Professor Hulk a new personality entirely. Of course, the MCU doesn't have a Doc Samson available to do the mind work on Banner, and there's no Gray Hulk either. So however Banner takes control of the Hulk, he'll have to do it another way. The only character that has demonstrated the ability to manipulate people's minds, the Scarlet Witch, was dusted away in the snap. But they don't call Bruce Banner a science bro for nothing. He's got options. There have been a number of ways that Bruce has gotten his hands on the wheel in giant green wrecking ball mode. One of the more comic book ways that Bruce has ended up in control of the Hulk was when he rode a gamma wave to another planet. The resulting exposure to excess gamma radiation gave Banner temporary control of the Hulk. While it doesn't seem likely that Bruce will be surfing a gamma wave to another planet in Endgame, it's possible that the science bro might science up a method to redo the experiment that hulked him up in the first place, believing that this will bring the Hulk back to fighting form with Banner in the driver's seat. In the comics, this change was only temporary, and there's likely going to be Hulk to pay, if Banner is able to take control of the Hulk's smashing body without him. While this is the most likely scenario, there are even more ways that Banner has taken control of his smashier self. Doc Samson isn't the only Banner buddy who has stepped up to help out Banner with his rage monster problem. Reed Richards has also taken a swing at giving Banner control in perhaps the most super science way possible. Richards broke Banner down to his individual molecules and then rearranged them together again, leaving Banner in control. Just like with Doc Samson, the Marvel Cinematic Universe doesn't have a Reed Richards yet. The merge between Fox and Disney to return the rights of both the Mutants and the Fantastic Four to Marvel is still being worked out, making it unlikely that someone like Reed Richards will make his way into Endgame. But there's another super scientist out there who the Russos have confirmed survived the snap, despite what the display Banner is looking at says, and that's science sis Shuri. Shuri was the head of research in the scientifically advanced land of Wakanda, with its nearly endless supply of vibranium. If there's anyone in the MCU capable of breaking Banner down to his parts and putting him back together again, it'd be her. Now, it's not likely that this specific method will make the transition from page to screen, but Shuri's access to technology and her own formidable sciencing skills could play a role. That could take the form of Kimoyo beads, those all-purpose balls of vibranium tech that can do pretty much everything, including acting as communicators to stabilize the wounds of a certain CIA agent who had taken a bullet for a Wakandan. That kind of external technology giving Banner the hands on the wheel has its own precedent in the comics. Again with the barrel-chested scientist Doc Samson. Samson made Banner something called an encephalo helmet, which is essentially a brain bucket that allowed him to take control of the Hulk to save Glenn Talbot. In the MCU, Glenn Talbot was the frenemy of Coulson's agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., who eventually became Graviton. It turns out that, while Earth was dealing with Thanos, it was also threatened by the rise of Graviton and a group of aliens called the Confederacy. Earth was having a bad day. If the Kimoyo beads don't provide the answers, or vibranium can't shake up Banner's molecules, and vibranium can do anything, there is another option. Doctor Strange may have been dusted away on Thanos' homeworld of Titan, giving Tony Stark cryptic clues to, well, at least the name of the next Avengers movie. There's another master of the mystical arts available on Earth, waiting on that wedding invitation from Tony Stark, and that is Wong. Back to the comics again. The Hulk has found himself on a number of planets. Sometimes, as mentioned, it's by riding a gamma wave. Other times, it's groups like the Illuminati deciding to relocate the Hulk to protect property values worldwide. Of course, the plan resulted in a very angry Hulk returning and declaring war on everybody. But we'll have more on that in a second. On one of these planet hops, he ended up on a magical world where one of the magic people magicked the Hulk, giving Banner control. It's possible that, in desperation, Banner could reach out to his new friend Wong to give him control of the Hulk. Now let's remember what the Russos said about the Hulk refusing to come out. If he's resentful of what puny Banner has to offer in his partnership between them, then he's bound to be super resentful if Banner takes control. None of these methods manage to eradicate the Savage Hulk entity entirely, and when the effects wear off, it's likely to make the events that took place on Sakaar look like a vacation. When Thor finally was able to get the Hulk to revert to Banner, he said that he and the Hulk always had a hand on the wheel. But in Sakaar, where the Hulk remained the Hulk for over 2 years, Banner was shut out. As we all know, the Hulk gets stronger the angrier he gets, which might end up being true of his personality as well. While a Banner-controlled Hulk might help the remaining Avengers restore the universe, it might come at a cost of a super angry Hulk. While the last time that resulted with the Hulk isolating himself from the entire planet, he might take his rage out on the people who helped Banner take control in the first place. While the rights issues with Universal restrain the possibilities for a solo Hulk movie, an angry Hulk taking out his revenge would put him at odds with the rest of the planet, setting up the World War Hulk storyline, making the Hulk the main villain of the next Avengers movie. Sort of the same workaround that slid the Planet Hulk storyline into Thor Ragnarok. While Hulk versus everybody would be a truly epic showdown, there's another possibility that might have the Hulk seeing red. Literally. It turns out that gray and green aren't the only colors of the Hulk. Well, a Hulk, anyway. The original Hulk hater, General Thaddeus Thunderbolt Ross, has been looking for a way to stop the Hulk since he pressured Banner into creating him in the first place. In the comics, that resulted in, of course, a science accident, and as we all know, in the comics, a science accident creates a superpower character. In this case, it was the Red Hulk, who wasn't as strong as the Savage Hulk, but contained more of Ross's rationality. He walked the line of good guy and bad guy since emerging, and fake killing his General Ross self. As you can see, even if the original Hulk never comes out in Avengers Endgame, the opportunities for a different Hulk to appear are nearly endless. Those are the ways that the Hulk we see in Endgame might not be the Hulk that we know and love. What do you think? What form do you think Professor Hulk might take? Let us know in the comments section below, and don't forget to subscribe to CBR for more MCU videos. Thanks for watching.
Avengers Endgame is under a month away, and we just can't wait to see how our heroes will be able to right the wrongs caused by Thanos at the end of Infinity War. Now, the snapping has left us in shambles, and we're still not over losing Peter Parker, even though it's been nearly an entire year. Because of this, we'd love to see Thanos get taken out sooner rather than later, and we might just get our wish in Endgame. Ever since Thanos snapped half of all life in the universe out of existence, fans have been coming up with theories on how the Avengers are going to reverse the decimation. Now, many of these theories center around our heroes traveling through time in Endgame to get all of the Infinity Stones together before Thanos does, and then taking out the Mad Titan in a grand finale battle of the ages. That sounds like a great plan for our heroes and would surely make for a good fight, but as a moviegoer, wouldn't this just turn Endgame into Infinity War 2.0? Marvel Studios has been building up an incredible finale, and we think that seeing a rehash of Infinity War in Endgame isn't the way they want to end the Infinity Saga. Now, while we definitely think time travel will be a huge part of Avengers Endgame, since leaked set photos show our heroes back at the Battle of New York with a new guest in Ant-Man and some interesting gadgets on their wrists, we think Thanos will meet his end much earlier than many fans expect. In the first Endgame trailer, we saw Thanos' armor on display like a scarecrow and then saw him walking through a field. If you're a comic book fan, then you know all about Farmer Thanos. After Thanos wiped out half of all life in the universe in the comics to impress the personification of death, yes, he does it in the comics to impress a chick, not because of a lack of resources, he decides to retire and then become a farmer. While his motivations may be different in the MCU, we still don't understand why he didn't just double the universe's resources. It's clear he's living the simple life in Endgame too. In the Super Bowl trailer, we saw Rocket Raccoon opening a barn door and then immediately made the connection that he might be on Thanos' farm. Rocket was finally opening up to his friends, and then Thanos took them all away from him. Rocket even heard Groot say, "I am Groot," for the last time, and James Gunn himself tweeted that the talking tree meant dad when saying it this time. With all this anger inside him, Rocket might want to have a face-to-face conversation with the Mad Titan, who took the family he never had away from him. Also, in the Super Bowl trailer, we see Thor overlooking what seems to be the place Thanos snapped his fingers and triggered the dusting. Of course, he can't just simply go back to Asgard because, well, its foundation was completely destroyed, as Korg so eloquently pointed out in Thor Ragnarok. He has also had a pretty rough couple of weeks with his dad Odin dying, and then his brother Loki dying at the hands of Thanos. Oh, and the Mad Titan wiping out half of all living creatures in the known universe. Thor might want to speak with Thanos too, and by speak, we mean beat the heck out of him. Does this all point to Thanos, Rocket, and Thor being in the exact same place at the exact same time? We think it's definitely a possibility, and if we're seeing all of this in the trailers, and the trailers only use footage from the first 15 to 20 minutes of the movie, then it's likely that this battle with Thanos will take place early in the film. Rocket probably has his hands on some powerful technology, and Thor is one of the strongest Avengers out there. But even without the power of the Infinity Stones, Thanos is still incredibly strong. After all, he is a Titan. Even if Thor actually aims for the head this time, it might not be enough to take Thanos down once and for all. They may need the support from one more hero to help turn the tide, and that hero may be none other than Captain Marvel. Why Captain Marvel? Well, for starters, she's often associated with the Space Stone, one of the 6 Infinity Stones Thanos collected in Infinity War, and as we've seen in the scenes in the most recent Avengers Endgame trailer, the one where Thor calls Stormbreaker to his hand and then Carol Danvers didn't even flinch, Thor and Captain Marvel seem to have formed a friendship, with Thor even saying, "I like this one." Maybe that initial bond was made because they fought alongside each other to defeat Thanos. Also, as you know from her standalone movie, Carol Danvers and Ronan the Accuser know each other, and Thanos knows Ronan. So it's likely that Thanos also knows who Captain Marvel is, and won't be too surprised to see her show up to help Thor and Rocket defeat him. She could also destroy a spaceship with a single punch, so just imagine what she could do to Thanos. Kevin Feige himself has said Captain Marvel is the most powerful hero in the MCU, so with Thor and Rocket by her side, we have no doubt this trio could take down Thanos. Just defeating Thanos isn't going to bring our dusted heroes back though. After Thanos snapped his fingers at the end of Infinity War, the Infinity Gauntlet was heavily damaged, and who knows the state of the Infinity Stones. It's possible that the Gauntlet can't house the stones anymore, which means the Science Bros might have to make their own gauntlet. It's also possible that the stones aren't working because they need to recharge, or maybe they're damaged themselves. While the Avengers may have succeeded in avenging their fallen comrades, having a broken Infinity Gauntlet and worn out Infinity Stones means they can't simply reverse the snap and then bring our dusted heroes back. Right when they think they've failed, Ant-Man could swoop in and reveal the possibility of time travel through the quantum realm, which will allow our heroes to go back in time and then make things right. We thought Scott Lang was stuck in the quantum realm forever at the end of Ant-Man and the Wasp, but he definitely found a way out, and we think it involves those time vortexes Janet Van Dyne warned him about. Maybe those snazzy new Avengers suits are designed to keep our heroes safe in the quantum realm. Going through a time vortex might also explain why Scott Lang looks like a man out of time in the most recent Endgame trailer. All in all, it just makes sense for the Avengers to get rid of Thanos early on in the movie, so they could focus solely on bringing back those who were lost in the decimation. Thanos is as vulnerable as ever since he's retired and no longer has the power of the Infinity Stones by his side, which could make for one heck of an interesting battle to kick off Endgame.
There is no shortage of Avengers Endgame predictions, but today we're going to be examining one of them a little bit closer. Based on some comments actor Chris Evans has made, many people assume Endgame will be the last time we see Steve Rogers in the MCU. This brave super soldier has tried to sacrifice himself once before, but does that mean he'll do so again? We'll talk about his odds of survival and the chance that another character may decide to step up. Why is it so many people think Captain America's gonna die during Avengers Endgame? Well, basically, it's all Chris Evans' fault. Okay, so that's oversimplifying things a little bit, but he didn't help matters with one particular social media post. He's been a part of the MCU for years, to the point where we now have to worry about practical yet dull matters like movie contracts. It's widely believed Chris Evans signed onto a standard 6-movie deal with Marvel Studios, following his appearance in Captain America: The First Avenger. He's been in 2 Captain America movies, The Winter Soldier and Civil War, as well as The Avengers, Age of Ultron, Infinity War, and the upcoming movie Endgame. Excluding The First Avenger and a couple of cameos, this means Endgame is going to be the 6th Marvel movie for Evans, and many believe it could be his last. He's also talked about wanting to leave the world of superheroes behind in order to focus on other ventures, including directing. Let's not forget that he's been playing the role of Steve Rogers for years, and it's understandable he might want to move on to new things. He also said he would rather leave while he's on top, instead of waiting until people are sick and tired of seeing him in his Captain America costume. And then there's the fateful tweet from when he finished filming Endgame. This was from so long ago, we didn't even know the movie was going to be called Endgame at the time. Evans stated, "It was an emotional day to say the least. Playing this role for over 80 years has been an honor. To everyone in front of the camera, behind the camera, and in the audience, thank you for your memories. Eternally grateful." Naturally, people started panicking about how that tweet definitely 100% meant Steve Rogers is going to die in Endgame. That, combined with Evans' contract and his previous statements about his role in the MCU, pretty much signed his death warrant as far as many fans were concerned. But let's back up just a second. Everybody knows Endgame is indeed the end of an era, and by era, we mean a phase of Marvel movies. It's the end of Phase 3, and Phase 4 will kick off with Spider-Man: Far From Home. And not to diminish the poetic nature of Chris Evans, but this tweet sounds like a pretty standard one about wrapping up a movie. He said Endgame was the culmination of 10 years of filming and 22 movies, and was therefore a pretty emotional day for the cast and crew. Evans said he would have tweeted the same sentiment regardless of what happens at the end of the movie, or to his character specifically. And as far as his contract goes, it's entirely possible he's gotten an extension or signed a new one. Just because Marvel might focus on some other heroes for a bit doesn't necessarily mean they're going to kill off all the classics. Plus, people don't have a great history of staying down in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. We don't want to spoil anything, but we have a feeling Peter Parker is going to be coming back. Otherwise, Far From Home is going to be really depressing, and Steve Rogers will be the least of our worries. Now that we've gone over some of the logistical reasons people think Cap is on his way out, let's take a look at the storyline. There are many things which make Steve Rogers a sympathetic character many of us can relate to. He struggled with trying to keep up with his friend Bucky Barnes for most of his life, and was frequently made to feel like he was nothing special. But it was his personality and strong moral convictions which caused Dr. Erskine to choose him to receive the super soldier serum that transformed him into Captain America. Right from the get-go, it was clear Steve Rogers is a man of conviction. This provided an interesting contrast between him and other characters, which we've seen play out in the MCU. Steve's sense of right and wrong inspired Natasha Romanoff, who was used to simply following orders from her employers. It also caused him to run into conflict with Tony Stark, who he has accused of being selfish in the past. When the two first met in the Avengers, Steve chastised Tony for not spending enough time thinking about others before himself. He even accused Tony of being unwilling to sacrifice his own safety to save others. And we know that sacrifice isn't something Captain America makes a habit of shying away from. In his first big screen movie, we saw him plunge into the Arctic in a heroic effort to save the lives of others. Before he went down, we saw him looking at a picture of Peggy Carter, a photo which the Endgame trailer reveals he still carries around. Despite the fact that Peggy passed away years ago, it's clear Steve still thinks of her and his old life before he became Captain America. And Steve Rogers was definitely in his element during Avengers Infinity War, because sacrifice was one of the major themes in that movie. Vision offers to sacrifice himself in order to destroy the Mind Stone before Thanos can get to it, but Steve tells him that heroes don't trade lives. It's a simple line that represents an interesting moral concept. He believes that in general, it's wrong to sacrifice the lives of others for the greater good. Placing a value on individual lives is kind of the hallmark of a superhero, so this outlook isn't very surprising. Nor is the fact that Thanos believes the opposite. Thanos is totally down with sacrificing people for the, quote, greater good, or at least what he thinks is the greater good in his megalomaniacal mind. He doesn't believe in the value of an individual, while our heroes spend the movie sacrificing things to help others. Loki sacrifices the Space Stone to help Thor, Groot sacrifices his arm for Stormbreaker's handle, and Vision does ultimately sacrifice himself to save others. Even Thanos is forced to make a sacrifice in order to obtain the Soul Stone from Vormir. With all of this lined up, it's easy to see why people believe there's going to be yet another big sacrifice during Endgame, and why they think it's going to be Steve. But let's not forget about his old friend Tony Stark. Robert Downey Jr. has been in the MCU even longer than Chris Evans, and let's just say he's getting paid a pretty penny for these movies. There could be many practical reasons for Marvel Studios to get rid of Iron Man, and some story-related ones as well. We said earlier that Steve once accused Tony of being unwilling to sacrifice, but we now know that's not true. During the Avengers, he puts his own life in grave danger by grabbing onto a nuclear missile and taking it through a wormhole. Needless to say, that was a pretty impressive move, which showed that Tony is more than capable of just talk in a flashy suit. We also know that he cares deeply for Steve, despite struggling to show it at some points in their relationship. But even after their battle during Civil War, Steve was still on his mind. In Spider-Man Homecoming, Happy Hogan talks about moving the new Captain America shield, presumably designed by Tony. And of course, there's also the kinder, gentler, or at least trying to be Tony that we've seen during both Homecoming and Infinity War. If things get bad during Endgame and a sacrifice needs to be made, it seems just as likely it would be made by Tony and not Steve. And really, when it comes to things going sour, it's really a question of when rather than if. Many fans believe that in order to defeat Thanos and undo the decimation, our heroes are going to have to interact with the Infinity Stones at various points in the history of the MCU. Getting your hands on an Infinity Stone is not easy, not the least of which because they can be difficult to track down and get to. Not to mention how messy it can be if you try to pick one up when it's not in the proper container. But there is one Infinity Stone which is a lot more difficult to get a hold of than the others. During Infinity War, we learned that the stones are sentient to a degree, and they aren't cool with just anybody coming along and picking them up and using them. When the Space Stone didn't want to deal with the Red Skull, it sent him hurtling through space. Now that's a power we wish we had. He ended up on Vormir, guarding the Soul Stone, which meant getting a new outfit and learning to appreciate his alone time. The Red Skull wanted an Infinity Stone, and now he's forced to hang out with one he can't possess. In order to take the Soul Stone, you have to sacrifice someone you love. And even Thanos loves somebody in his own terrible, terrible way. He sacrificed Gamora to gain the Soul Stone, so doesn't that mean our heroes will have to make a similar sacrifice? We know that none of them would sacrifice another person, but that doesn't mean sacrificing themselves is out of the question. The Russo brothers have made it sound as though the Red Skull is taken off to parts unknown, but it seems like Nebula figured out what it took for Thanos to obtain the Soul Stone during Infinity War. And Nebula and Tony Stark seem to be spending some time together during the trailer for Endgame. Although we saw Tony floating around by himself, we assume he and Nebula had some time to chat and catch up. They also both seem to work together fixing some things, and both end up back on Earth. If Nebula tells Tony how to obtain the Soul Stone, it's possible he could keep it to himself until the last possible moment to ensure nobody else tries to sacrifice their lives for it. Another tidbit from the Russo brothers is that Steve Rogers is going to experience a serious character arc during Endgame. Watching someone like Tony Stark sacrifice himself to save so many people would definitely have a profound impact on Steve. It would also be a tragic but fitting end for Tony, as it shows just how far he has come on his hero's journey. In many ways, Tony and Thanos have had similar journeys over their histories in the MCU. Thanos has spent ages preparing for an inevitably terrible event, in his case, depletion of resources. But so is Tony, and he's been trying to prevent it ever since the first Avengers. But Thanos and Tony are only alike to a point, and we think that point could be on the cliffs of Vormir. If Tony's going to sacrifice himself for the Soul Stone, he'll need to have someone there to take the stone once he's gone. Steve is a character who understands the meaning of sacrifice and would be able to comprehend the magnitude of what Tony is doing and why he has to do it. Not to mention that having Steve stand by while Tony sacrifices himself would be pretty much one of the saddest things ever. And we all know how much Marvel loves toying with our hearts. So, what do you think about Steve Rogers' chances of surviving Avengers Endgame? Do you think his time in the MCU is coming to a close? Or will we see him again? Tell us your predictions in the comments section below, and then click on that subscribe button for more videos from us here at CBR. Bye for now.